put into effect. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Invictus, by William Ernest Henley. Chapter 1. Steve Grayling was crouched in a hidden position, the ink-black desert night deathly quiet all around him. Or at least it had been until the last few minutes of his sentry duty, which was scheduled to last from 0400 hours until first light. But then the first of the animals had appeared. In the open, empty quiet of the Iraqi desert, his senses had been heightened, his hearing tuned in to the utter absence of life. The slightest noise would signify movement, which meant something living was out there, which in turn might signal danger. But the bone-dry rock and sand had offered little to remind him that he was still on Earth, and not on some barren, lifeless moonscape. That was how it had been for the first 90 minutes of his watch, until, from out of nowhere, the herd of goats had appeared. The hollow tinkling of the animal's bell sounded alien and alarming as it beat out an eerie rhythm across the bare stillness. It seemed impossible that any four-legged creature could survive in a place so empty of water and vegetation, yet here the goats were. And with the scraggly creatures had come the inevitable two-legged escort. Everything about the desert night was black. The moon was hanging low on the horizon, and above it the stars formed a skein of brightness that stretched across the heavens, but still the light intensity at ground level had to be no more than 10 millilux. Under such illumination, the terrain all around him was so devoid of features as to form a flat, uniform void. It was only the goats that stood out, their erect forms casting long, leggy moon shadows. The white splotches on their coats glowed silvery bright like patches of polished chainmail set into a suit of dark armor. As for the goat-herder, he appeared giant-like, casting mighty, distorted shadows as he walked, using a long stick to steer the herd to wherever it was he was heading. Steve Grayling hunched over the hulking great form of a 50-caliber heavy machine gun, its barrel tracing the herd's every move. He'd long lost the feeling in his hands. Come nightfall, the temperature plummeted in the desert, and he was stiff from the cold. Ice had seeped into his every joint and limb, yet still his frozen fingers gripped resolutely the twin handles of his weapon. He was minutely adjusting his aim and poised to unleash a barrage of rounds onto the target. That's if the goat-herder made the fatal mistake of stumbling onto their position. He hoped to hell that moment never came, for then he'd have to decide whether or not to open fire. Steve faced a horrible dilemma. If he were to open fire, it would be against all the rules of engagement, and he might well face the full force of law for doing so, for the goat-herder was no more than an adolescent kid. Killing kids, that wasn't what he had imagined doing when he'd gone for selection into special forces. Back then, he'd fancied joining the elite, the few who dare, so he could take the fight to the bad guys, Britain's foremost terrorist enemies. Steve was one of the veterans of the squadron, one of the old and the bold. Back when he'd joined, Britain's chief enemy had been the IRA, and he'd never for one moment imagined himself preparing to unleash a barrage of armor.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.